There's a different set of pride and values and value that you get when you drive through a neighborhood and you see your yard sign, and you drive down the road and you see your window decal. At some point, if it just doesn't align with the way that you want to be known by your customers, you have to separate. The rep I was speaking with said, alarm systems are a luxury. You should be glad we can afford one. And so it kind of, I just saw your eyebrows go up, and that's kind of what happened with me. It stopped me in my tracks. You're doing things to set you apart. So that, in my mind, if you can summarize anything from a service perspective, it's all in the attitude and appearance that you create when you walk in. The economy tanked, crime took off, and suddenly this hobby became a business.
Well done, well played, very nice. I will be eating these donuts. All right, well, good morning and welcome to Coffee Break with Jake. Seeing a lot of familiar faces in the call. If you're new to the call, we have this Coffee Break with Jake call every Friday at 11 a.m. And I host it selfishly to learn from people much smarter than me, because I found that the most important things I know I've learned from other people. This week, I'm really excited to be joined by Marvin Smith, owner of Orlando Emergency Signal. And I'm really glad to have you all here with us as well. I've had some of our dealers asking to hear from folks that just are doing business right and, want to learn how they got started, want to learn, how they operate their business on a regular basis, so that they can apply some of those things to their own businesses. And I couldn't think of a better guest to have with us other than Marvin, who is self-described as unapologetically client-focused. Marvin, if you would, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're calling in from, just down the street here on the interstate.
Hi, everybody. I am Marvin Smith. I am with Orlando Emergency Signal. We are located right in the middle of Central Florida, a few miles from Jake, and right off of I-4. And I'm excited to be here today. I love talking about service. So when Jake asked if I'd be willing to do it, it was an easy answer for me. So thanks for having me, Jake. I appreciate the invite.
Awesome. So glad to have you, Marvin. And Marvin, one of the things I really like about you is how willing you are to kind of support the industry, not just informally, but formally, if I can talk, as most recently as the president of the Integration Association of Florida. And I want to thank you for all that you've done with our association here in Florida. But tell us a little bit about the company history. How long has Orlando Emergency Signal been in business? How did you end up in the alarm business?
So I would say my story is unique in the beginning, but probably similar to many people on this call. Let's be honest, I was a nerd as a kid. And so I grew up on a family farm up in Delaware, and I had two passions. One was anything electronic, and the other was riding a dirt bike in a field. So those were kind of my two go-tos. And I will selfishly admit that I would get very excited as Friday would approach because those two things were coming up. And one of my favorite things was to beg my parents to take me to Radio Shack. And so at an early age, I knew I loved electronics and technology. And I was fortunate enough to have a grandfather and two parents that saw that in me, and they fostered that for me. So it was very common that my grandfather would come home and he would have found something, out on his journeys, and he'd say, "Hey, I bought this for you. I want to see if you can put it back together, or this is broken. Can you get it to work?" And he would challenge me financially to get it to work. And so obviously there was this motivator because the more money I brought in, the more money I could spend either on electronics or fuel for that bike. And so it worked really well. And I always joke and tell people that by the time I was in high school, my parents were counting the days for me to go to college because I was practicing foiling techniques on all of our home windows. And so my dad would say I couldn't wait for him to move out to go to college so I could scrape all that off the windows. But I'd say by the time I was in, I don't know, 11th or 12th grade, I was installing alarms. And then I started working for a family-owned alarm company right outside of my college, just a couple blocks away. I worked for them for a number of years, and Did a little bit of everything, but ultimately ended up working in the central station. And I worked my nights and weekends in the central station and went to class during the day. Um, Came down to Florida on a whim through a college recruitment program, worked for Disney for a summer, went back to school and kept doing that while I was in college, going back and forth. And then finally afterwards decided to move to Florida and make a run with it. And so my goal was to come down to Florida and work for Disney. And truthfully, I always thought I would retire from there. They're a great company and I love the work we did. And it was heavily service focused. So it was a good alignment with my values. And then in 2007, I was on vacation in Burbank visiting a colleague that had relocated out to California. And I got a phone call from the alarm company, and I had a national company monitoring my condo in Orlando. And they said, your system is in a comm failure and we've not heard from it. We need to schedule a service call. And having grown up in the industry, I knew enough about that to ask questions. And so I asked how long it had been since they had heard from my system. And I was surprised to hear them say it had been 60 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So we really started then a conversation of how can we get a technician out here to repair my system? And they were less than willing, and they were trying to schedule me 3 weeks out. And I had quite honestly, a sense of fear. I live downtown Orlando in a condo, and we have a fair amount of crime in Orlando, and I was nervous. And I said, "Look, my neighbor has a key. I can get someone to meet you." And we went round and around, and they passed me from one rep to another. And at the end of the call, the rep I was speaking with said, "Alarm systems are a luxury. You should be glad we can afford one." And so it kind of, I just saw your eyebrows go up, and that's kind of what happened with me. It stopped me in my tracks, and I wrote that down, and I said, "I'm going to repeat that to you, and then I want to figure out what the process to cancel my account is." And, initially I got into this industry as an adult thinking it would be a hobby. So my job was going to be with Disney. And if a buddy bought a house, I would put the alarm in. You learn quickly that that's a very naive approach when you realize what licensing and business requirements are in the state. And you suddenly are, thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, knee deep into it before you realize this has to be more than a hobby. And what happened was that was 2007. The economy tanked, crime took off, and suddenly this hobby became a business. And I ran two parallel paths for a long time where I was working at Disney. I was there over 25 years and I was slowly growing OES organically through referrals and friends, family, and neighbors and folks that I worked with. And so people saw value in service and reasonable pricing. And so it was a really easy switch for people. And we were able to grow to the point where I could no longer do two jobs well full time. So I said, certainly a paycheck is great from a, Fortune 100 company. But there's a different set of pride and values and value that you get when you drive through a neighborhood and you see your yard sign, and you drive down a road and you see your window decal, or you see your truck on the road, or someone says, "Thank you. We almost had a home fire last night," or someone broke in and the alarm works. So for me, it was an easy decision. It took some years to make it, but once I made it, I've not looked back, and I'm happy that I did it. So we are coming up on 19 years. So yeah, this
Oh my gosh.
19 years.
I gotta stop you for a second because my mind just blew up thinking, wait a second, 2007. I'm thinking that's like, in my mind, I'm thinking that's, I don't know, 5, maybe 10 years ago. But goodness me, we're coming up on 20 years.
Yeah,
That's incredible. That's incredible. So when it was 2007 the year that you started?
it is. It's the year I started with, my alarm being the first. Yes.
Yeah. And so were you, when you decided to go from doing this as a hobby to realizing, "Hey, I need to do this. I need to be really all in on this." Having led a successful career again in a Fortune 100, taking that jump, were there any fears, any reservations that you had about going out on your own?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you learn quickly you have to hustle, right? So when you're working for a large company like that, you take a lot for granted. You take the fact that payroll is not an issue for you. You take for granted that you're going to get vacation. And when you get home at night, you turn your phone off and you're at home. When you own a business, or quite honestly, you work in this industry, you realize that those sets change. So you are on call. Still to this day, I carry on call shifts throughout the month as well. So, and you know me well enough, know I'm hands on and I'm in the field as well. So that dynamic changes, but you have you probably have more concerns or more fears of what you have to do because you're also taking care of other people at that point. So when you start bringing on employees, you need to make sure you're doing right by them and that you're able to provide them some form of life and lifestyle as well. So all of that changes. But once you get into it and you get your groove and you figure out what you're doing, it does become second nature.
How did your experience at Disney, you talk about values alignment. How did your experience at Disney prepare you um, for being a small business owner, and being a service-oriented business? How did that help you?
Sure. I think first and foremost, how that helped me is I was a kid when I started there. I was in college. And so it allowed me to become an adult in an environment where things were very structured and very professional. But it also taught me that life happens. And as part of life, service failures happen. And it's very easy to say, I'm working at the most magical and the happiest place on earth. But, Disney's 43 square miles. It's 2 times the size of Manhattan. So you can't really imagine a day in Manhattan where there would not be a service failure. So if you multiply that scale times 2 and say it's unreasonable to think at Disney World where at any time there could be more than 250,000 people on that property, that there's not going to be a service failure. I mean, things are mechanical, they're electronic. We can't control the weather. People become ill, people get into arguments. Service fails for a variety of reasons. And so it really taught me that I can either acknowledge them and learn from them, or I can ignore them and just keep repeating them. So that was probably, I'd say, the largest gain from what I got out of the professionalism side of it. And then from a service side, I don't think it's a secret, but it's our service advantage because, we actively promote that. And you got the unapologetically, client focus line from job postings we've done or posts we've done online because we call it out. And so to us, what that means is that we take full responsibility for the level of service that we're providing. And so that's not by accident. That's by me seeing it and watching it for those 25 plus years.
So, from the time that you started and really kind of went out on your own full time to today, how has the business grown? Are there, when you went from it just being you to now having a team, how did that change the experience as a business owner? We see a lot of folks that go from being a technician to being an owner operator of an alarm company. In some cases, we see sales folks that go, even like my dad, he went from sales to owning an alarm company. But then you go to that next step and you start hiring people. How did you navigate that? What was that like going from, "Hey, it's Marvin. I know how I do things. I do things the way I do things every time," to now having to train other folks to do things the way that you want them to be done? What was that transition like for you?
That's tough, Jake. I mean, to be honest with you, because you are relinquishing some control. And for those of us that have started a business, you put everything into it, right? So then when you have to back up a little bit and step back and you have to put trust in people that are working for you, it causes you to look at things a little differently. I've been asked that question before, and I always give the same answer as it relates to window decals. And maybe I'm a little OCD, I'll admit it, but our logo is a shield shape, and that doesn't have square lines on it. So I was very particular in the early days of how that sticker had to look, right? And so I would not give them to clients. I would put them on the windows myself because I could ensure they were straight and they were lined up. And as you start hiring people and you start expanding your team, you realize that you have to hire based on a certain skill set that's important to you and your culture, but you also ultimately have to be responsible to train those that are working with or for you to deliver on that same level of service or consistency. And so, as a compromise, our window decals today are rectangular because it's more easier for people to line up, and I'm not pulling off the road with a razor and scraping someone's sticker off. But it's important to me to still teach that. Um, and if you ask anyone on my team how many levels we buy in a year, but we want things straight on the walls. We want it to look right. And so, to your question, you have to adjust in realizing you have to place confidence and trust in people. And if you've trained them properly, like Audrey or others on this call could tell you, you've set them up for success. They know what the expectation is and they're going to deliver on it because it's important to your culture and to your organization.
You know, it's so funny you talk about the stickers, and I just think about all the times I've, growing up in a family alarm business, I would remember my dad would see a place where the sticker was peeling or the sticker was crooked, or this is one that always ground his gears, was where his sticker was up, but the old alarm company's stickers were still up. And I'm not even kidding you. We would stop, he would call into the office and find out who it was that was out there and schedule somebody out to go, fix this because it was so important. But, as much as we try to instill, our core values in our team, the way that we do things, sometimes we fall short of that, right? Even sometimes we fall short of our own standards for one reason or another. What advice would you give to business owners on the call that might hire somebody that's and they're trying to integrate them into the team. They're trying to get them aligned with, the way that they do things. But those folks, for one reason or another, might fall short one time or two times. How do you address it? And how would you recommend that they address it with the team to try to help them kind of come around? Any advice that you'd offer there?
Yeah, sure. I think you have to realize that they're coming into an operation or an organization that you have put in place and you have procedures or policies or expectations, but they may not come with that same skill set or that same experience. We have started several years ago hiring with no industry experience, and that was a big change for us. And so those folks coming in, they don't know necessarily what those expectations are, and they're not going to get it one time reading an employee policy manual. So you have to model that behavior and you have to model it frequently. You can't take shortcuts in front of them and expect them not to. So, for example, if I'm on a job site with a technician and I'm asking them not to be using their cell phones to check social media or texting with family or friends, I can't pull mine out and do it, right?
Right.
You have to be respectful of what you're asking them to do is something that you do and that you believe in for the same reason, because they have to see it. As soon as someone sees you taking a shortcut as that owner or that leader or that trainer, then everyone thinks it's okay to do that. And I will admit, I've lost technicians over the years that have said I'm too picky. They've said, I mean, I would get down to the details of how I want it, cables wired and how I wanted them pulled. But they would say, this is the way I've always done it. And, I had a technician that was fantastic that worked with me for a couple of years, but I could not slow him down. And so in the process, he would scratch walls, he would damage to equipment because he came from an environment and trained in an environment where he was paid based on how much he got done in that day, not based on the number of hours that he was working. And so his mindset was very difficult to change. And we finally got to a point where I didn't want to damage anyone else's house any longer. And we had to say, we're going to have to part ways because this is my business and this is my name on that yard sign. This is my expectation. And you can come on board and I'm trying as hard as I can to bring you there, but sometimes you have to say that it's not a right fit.
Yeah, I think it's so important the way that you talk about in some respects relinquishing control, letting people kind of do more things, but also holding them to a high standard, right? Because again, to your point, it is your name on the line, right? It is your reputation on the line. And, there's opportunity for coaching, there's opportunity for correction. But at some point, if it just doesn't align with the way that, you want to be known by your customers, you have to separate. And so, all right, so you went out on your own, you started, growing your business. What would you say some of the biggest milestones are? Was there any kind was there ever like a point where you're like, "Hey, yeah, this is starting to really come together." What was that milestone moment or moments for you?
I think you set them yourself, and I've had several. I think the first time when I hit 100 accounts, many years ago, that was like the goal, right? To hit 100 accounts, and now that's kind of fun to look back and think of those times. When we hit our 15-year anniversary, that was a big deal for us. We really celebrated that. Um, but for me personally, I think a lot of it is again, when someone calls and they say, when we ask how they've learned about our services and they say, I see your yard sign all over town or I see it throughout our neighborhood. those are kind of those touch points for me that are really significant because I understand at that point that we have some recognition of the brand. Um, if you have an alarm system or you don't have one, there's probably a good reason for both, but it doesn't mean you're actively looking for one. So you have a refrigerator in your home, I have one, it's running. I'm not paying attention to refrigerator ads as I see them pop up online or in the paper, right? But what's happening is as I'm exposed to those ads, I'm seeing that brand and that awareness so that when mine breaks, I'm not wasting a week trying to figure out who to call. And so for me, to your point, it was when people started recognizing the brand and really started understanding that we do have a presence in Central Florida. And part of that was, during COVID, we were fortunate to stay in business. Unfortunately, a lot of people were not. So it was important to me that trucks were still on the road and people still saw logos. And, even if I was running to Publix, I took a truck, right? Because I wanted people at Publix to see that we're part of this community and that we're still here. And so that's probably the biggest milestone for me, if I think back about it, was just the recognition of this is a company in Central Florida that is securing our neighbors.
I want to call out a couple of things from that. Number one, talking about celebrating the 100 account mark. And looking back, now I know, having blown, well past that, um, it doesn't negate the fact that that was a milestone at this time. And I would say that if there's business owners on this call, it's important to set and recognize the importance of some of these milestones along the way, because I don't know if you've experienced this, Marvin, but as you grow as a company, the goalpost keeps moving, right?
Absolutely.
You say, it's 100 accounts, it's 500
Yes.
accounts, now it's 1,000 accounts, and if you're not careful, you're constantly chasing a moving goalpost. So, I would suggest set these goals, set these milestone moments for yourself intentionally so that you can look at them, you can celebrate it, and then you can move the goalpost, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I also want to talk about, you mentioned taking your car, the OES vehicle to Publix. And I know Taylor Sears is on the call and we've talked about this before, but he encourages his folks to take their vehicle to all these different places
Absolutely.
because it just reinforces the brand, and I hear this all the time, even with small companies, that don't have a lot of trucks on the road. They'll get a phone call from somebody that says, "Hey, I see your trucks all over town," and they may only have 1 truck, but they're taking it to church, they're taking it to the grocery store, and it's like, it just creates this perception of, "Hey, we're here in this community." I really like that. It also makes me think of a conversation I had with Taylor last week about intentionally not servicing some types of accounts where you wouldn't want people to see your truck outside of that establishment, right? And I won't go into what the establishments are, but there are certain places that might require security and cameras, but you don't want your technician's vehicle there at 3 in the afternoon. And people are like, is he at the bar or is he putting in a camera system?
Yeah.
Talk to me about, you have these milestones and these accomplishments, building your team. What about challenges? Like, what types of challenges do you think have shaped your business or yourself as a leader? How did you, what were some of those challenges and how did you overcome them?
Yeah. And, if I go back to the earlier question, I can tie them together when you talked about, how do you instill your values and your methods with people? One of the challenges was I've had to learn to be more patient over the years because I don't know that I was always a patient person. I don't know that I am completely patient today, but I've had to learn to be more patient and I've had to learn to allow people to save face. And so, a challenge to overcome is it's very quick to give someone feedback, right? And we can all say feedback's the gift we want, right? But at the same time, people will only come to a job so many days in a row where they're getting feedback where they've had enough. So you have to be humble enough to say, let's sit down and talk about ways I used to do this, or let's talk about how I used to do this same thing, and then teach them a different way to do it because they've not seen it. So you have to be more conscious of that, and you have to be more delicate with that approach sometimes. I also think you have to, you know, you're talking about it a second ago, and I thought you were going in a different direction. I'm glad you didn't. But you were talking about how Taylor was saying there's some businesses we may not want to be associated with from a vehicle standpoint or a logo standpoint. Makes 100% sense to me. But there are also a lot of people that will quickly say, I would fire that client. I would fire that customer. I would fire that account. I don't want them, right? And I will tell you that I'm the exact opposite. I will say, I'm going to fight as hard as I can to keep that client and turn it around and help them figure out and help our team figure out how we can do better with that. This week, we had a technician on a job site and they were replacing a video doorbell and the wire broke and went inside the wall. And we had to chisel into the stucco and concrete to retrieve that wire. And it was a big deal because it was a nice home with a very particular client. And so going into it, we had to know what we were facing for that service call and then to be able to deliver on a service failure, right? And so when I go back to my patients, I have to realize that not every client is going to meet me where I am. And so I have to figure out how to really manage that expectation in that relationship with that client. So a lot of times I've learned whether it was Disney or in this industry or in this business, you have to own it and you have to apologize to people and you have to say, look, I'm really sorry this turned out this way, but we will make this right. And I find if you acknowledge that early on and then you start working on the solution, it works a lot better than if you just start trying to find a solution while you're stringing them along and they're waiting. So I think that's a good example of something where I've had to adjust to it. It's been a learning for me as we've grown the business because I don't have the ability to pass the buck, right? And I'm not a buck passer anyway, but you don't have the ability to do it. Just like you, there are calls that get through to you where you're the end of the line and you're talking to someone about a failure that's happening. You have to be able to solve it.
I'm glad you mentioned this because I hear this oftentimes that people will quote unquote fire a customer for being high maintenance. And my perspective on it is that sometimes our high maintenance customers, as much as it may be challenging to deal with them, I ask myself, is this customer making us better? Right? Because sometimes those high maintenance customers that push us, that are not necessarily easy to deal, not rude, not degrading to the staff, but just high maintenance and they have very specific needs. I think those are learning opportunities for us. I think they're opportunities for us to kinda, level ourselves up, and I think that's very important, and so I think of a customer right now that we still laugh when this gentleman calls in. He's not on the call. If he was, I'd still tell the story, but nobody wants to take the guy's call because it's gonna be like a whole thing, but I tell my staff, I'm like, "Hey, look, that guy can be challenging, but it's the good kind of challenging, right? Yeah. Now, if you run into a scenario where a wire goes back into the wall, you have a guy that knows what it's going to take to be there to get that done and to get that fixed in a way that doesn't destroy, this multi-million dollar home. And I think that's so important. Really glad to hear that. I think we share that perspective.
I
So,
do have a technique, Jake, that I will say too, that helps set you up for success early on. So in our CRM, we start everyone as a green light, we call it. So we use a traffic signal, green, yellow, red. Green is everything is great. Yellow is just use caution with this client. Just make sure you're doing everything properly. And red is stop, talk to the team, talk to the office before you make decisions. Everyone is green unless they're not. And if they're not, we notate that. So on the service ticket, when a technician is going out, they know going into it if it's a yellow or a red, because it helps set them up for that. Because if you can walk into that situation knowing it may be the first time you've dealt with that client, but the company or the other techs may have some history. So if you can share that and communicate, you're setting that technician up to be able, one, to deliver on your level of service, but two, to be prepared to deal with what they're going to. We've all had clients that are right on our shoulder, watching everything we're doing, questioning everything we're doing. If you know going into that, that's a very different experience than if you don't know.
I think that's so smart, and we try to use pop-up notes for some of that stuff. It says, on Marvin's account, it's like, "This guy's delightful, green light." On some of the other folks' call, it's like or some of their accounts, it's like, "Hey, watch out, call Jake before you talk to him. We gotta make sure we get this right." And talk to me about, you've can't again, I can't believe it's been nearly 20 years now. Um, Talk to me about how you've seen the security industry change since you got started.
I'll give some props to IAF for a second. We changed our name well over a year ago from Alarm Association of Florida to Integration Association of Florida. When we were going through that exercise of looking at the value in that, I was doing something similar within my own office, trying to get a feel for what those calls were. And I was also conscious at the same time as I was driving down the road looking at, my friends and colleagues' vans and trucks as to what language was on the truck. Did it say burglar alarm? Did it say burglary alarm? Did it say security? Did it say intrusion? What are those words? And what I started seeing was more video, more network, more cabling, more Wi-Fi. So all of those other words started to pop up. And I think to your question, what I've seen the most is as we've started to embrace and adapt with other technologies and other systems and other services, we've grown. There's a lot of conversation whether or not people feel threatened by DIY. I can only speak for me. I can tell you I don't. I feel like that's a very specific niche market, and most of my clients aren't people that want to go install equipment on their own. I think that's fine. But at the same time, I think as the industry has evolved, we know now that our number one inbound call is regarding video. It wasn't that way 5 years ago. It was about the alarm. Sometimes folks are calling now, they're just asking about a video doorbell, and we're doing an add-on as a security system to sell on a call that came in for a video doorbell. So for me, it's really been that the technology and the evolution of that, and quite honestly, video.
As a perception of, I think, kind of, again, we're talking about really some of consumers' expectations of what a security system is has changed to some degree, right? I think to a large degree, much more of a focus on video. Certainly a big focus on, I mean, kudos to, Ring. I think that there's a lot of people that think of a video doorbell now as a security system. So we know it's not, and we know the importance of kind of integrating everything together. Um, but as it changes, and as we kind of look at being an integrator, that's so encompassing, right? There's so many different things now between video and alarm systems and access control, maybe fire alarm systems, maybe networking that integrators are doing today. How do you handle making sure that folks understand what it is that you do and the services that you offer? Do you do any, are there any types of, intentional communication with customers about the comprehensive suite of services and products that you offer?
Yeah, I think you can ensure that you're showing products on your website. People want to see products as they're shopping online. They want to see what the range or your product line is. It's good timing because we've been working on a campaign that will start shortly, and we're going to call it Did You Know? And it's Did You Know that OES does, and we'll fill in the blanks. And as of yesterday, we were still nailing down what the frequency that communication will go out will be. But I'm brave enough to say that we've lost some accounts to folks out there like a Vivint, and then the client will call and they'll say, "Hey, I need to cancel. I went with another provider," and we learned that, they canceled with us because they've been with us for maybe 10 or 15 or 18 years or whatever it may be, and someone knocked on their door and said, "I have this beautiful touchscreen and these cameras," and we have that same opportunity to sell to them. So as a company, you have to have the ability to get in front of your existing client base, whether it's an inside sales rep or whether it's your collateral, whether it's just touch points. We all can be better at following up with them. Every time you're on a service call, you should be having that conversation. If you're updating a credit card number in your billing office, maybe there's a talking point for that month that they share with people as they're getting new expiration dates for cards. Did you know we offer video doorbells? Did you know we offer exterior and interior cameras? Did you know we offer smoke detection? So all of those different things to make sure that you're staying relevant in that, to see if you can communicate with them, to let them know that those services are provided with you. A good example is a client that signed up, again, to use that 18-year analogy, someone who signed up 18 years ago may not know that we can sell them a router. They may not know that we have video. They may not know we have video doorbells or that we do PERS today. So all of those things change. You have to, as you have contact with them, stay in communication with them about what you can offer, or ultimately you run the risk of losing that account.
Yeah, it's always a tough thing for me. Sometimes I'll have a conversation with one of our dealer partners, and we'll be talking about their business, and they'll mention that they install such and such product, And I'll tell them something like, "Hey, did you know we sell that?" And they're like, "Oh, I didn't know." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Oh, no." Like, we've been losing business to the point where Taylor sent me a list. He's like, "Hey, here's all the stuff, by the way, that, like, we buy. Could you let us know what you sell?" And I'm like, we have to recognize that there's very few partners, there's very few customers that we do business with that are like saying, "Hey, look, here's all the things I need. Would you guys check these boxes for me and let me know what you can do?" Like, um that's not we don't have the luxury of that in most cases. I love the idea of that campaign, the did you know? Love the idea of the talking points. I've talked to dealers where they install an alarm system and somebody else comes in and installs the camera system, installs the fire alarm system, installs the access control system, and in some cases, they end up losing the account because that company is smart enough to say, "Hey, by the way, we can also monitor your alarm
Yeah.
system." You know what I mean? And Audrey points out in the chat here about, the fact that the longer you're in business, the bigger risk you are of losing existing customers to somebody else. We've talked about the evolution of the industry just over the past 20 years. I'd say really the evolution of the industry in the past 5 years. It's changed so much that if you haven't talked to those customers from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago about the suite of services that you offer, you really run the risk of losing them to somebody else. Really love that idea of the campaign. Um, so, talking about campaigns and talking about strategy, um, what's something that you've tried in your business that's really helped kind of move the needle? Like, you guys implemented some new programs, a new strategy.
Mm.
What was it that's really kind of helped you move the needle most recently?
Um, I feel like as an industry, we're very stationary in what we sell. It's harder for us to, I think, react to the technology than it is sometimes for the end user. And so I think once you realize that sometimes you might necessarily be the roadblock or the speed bump that's preventing you from selling other items or services. Once you can let go of that and you can realize that there are things that really complement your business very well. Routers, I'll mention those again. I mean, if you're installing video and wireless video, in particular, if you're not putting in a router, and to throw you a prop, if you're not putting in a router that's not blessed and branded, like, you're making a mistake. You're in there putting a device onto their network, and their network can change. And you're the one then's rolling a truck out to reset devices. So get ahead of that now. So I to answer that question, I think it's really been adapting to changes in technology that has helped start to set us apart other than service. Because, for example, um, we call it rapid OES. So if your alarm goes off within seconds, you're getting the text message, and we're allowing you to cancel or request a dispatch from that text message. We see responses within 4 seconds of that going out. 4 seconds. Compare that to the traditional mode of an operator having to dial or electronically dial a number. You don't answer after X number of rings. We're going to listen to your voicemail, leave a message, move on to another caller. You're easily in that 1 to 2 minute range. We're getting reaction time as early as 4 seconds. So those are things that you can adapt to and you can sell that really become kind of wants from the consumers when they know that that's something you can offer. Right now, if your phone went off, you're not going to stop what you're doing ideally and pick up your cell phone and answer a phone call. But could you look down and cancel an alarm or request the police from your phone? Absolutely. Most people are working or they're busy. So you have to adapt to it. And I think for the dealers that are on here, if you're not using options through either your software, through your providers, or your central stations to cancel a dispatch, you're making a mistake. I really think once you do it, you'll see this as a no-brainer. I've stood in the room and heard dealers say before, my clients do not want text messages. Now, are there probably a percentage of clients that don't text or don't want it? Yes. But is the percentage of people that do want it gonna be much greater? Absolutely. And if you can make an impact on the false alarm reduction by doing that, what's the risk of doing it, right? You're helping the industry, you're helping our law enforcement professionals or emergency responders, and you're helping set yourself apart. So I think, again, it's really the evolution of that technology and making sure you're current on it, you're rolling it out. That's what starts to set you apart. And to your earlier point, if I'm in someone's house selling a security system and I see their television is in the box on the floor, I'm going to ask them who's hanging that television because I want that job, right? And so that's how you evolve, and that's how you kind of start to feel like you're getting more of that market share because you're doing more things inside of that house.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think of the monitoring piece of this. So many times alarm dealers, they install the equipment that they're familiar with, right? Maybe they install some new equipment as they become familiar with it, or as customers demand it. Um, and they're always focused on equipment, and they don't focus enough, in my opinion, on the experience that the subscriber has in their interaction with the central station. I always joke with my friends, and Jerry, you'll appreciate this. I always joke with my friends at central stations. I say, if I die and go to hell, I'll be a central station sales rep. Because it's a hard thing, a very commoditized thing to sell. And so many times people leave their central station because of a bad experience and choose their next central station based on price.
Mhm.
I'm always shocked by this, right? I'm always shocked by it, but I think about my own experience, things like trouble signals.
Mhm.
Gosh, I don't wanna don't call me to tell me that I've got a sensor low battery. Like, I'll be in a meeting, and I've got a call from the central station, and I will, because I've got kids and my wife, and I gotta know, "Hey, what's going on?" I will step out, and it'll be like, "You've got a sensor low battery at SS&Si administration." And I'm like, "You're kidding me. This could have been a text message. So, Dad, if you're listening, update my account. I just want a text message if I get a low battery, because it drove me nuts the other day to get a phone call on it." But I think those little things, if you're intentional
I
about.
am listening, so that's I took note to that, okay? I came on to listen to Marvin, the wonderful guy there. All right, thanks.
Thank you. Otherwise, I'll just switch into OES because he's got the texting.
He's
It's
the
Charge
he's
him
the
for his
best. He's the
charge him
best.
for that change. Charge him for that change, George. Charge him.
But anyways, I think you're right, Marvin. I think you're right about the text messaging, but I also think really it's so many other things when we think about user experience. If we don't analyze the experiences that our customers are having on a daily basis,
Yeah.
we don't understand what kind of impact these changes might have. So talk to me. Uh,
All right, you got a J coffee breakdown.
oh my goodness, this is hilarious. Somebody's delivered donuts.
I'm guessing Jerry had something to do with that.
There he is.
Jerry, you're making me jealous with that box of donuts the other day.
What kind of donuts you get up there, Jerry?
It depends. If the areas that I go to, like no matter what, there's always a Dunkin'. But if I'm going to a certain area to meet certain people, I try to find the best donut shop in that area. Like give me the boutique of that local area rather than here's some generic. But if we don't have that ability, then Dunkin' Donuts always works.
I love a good donut, man. I tell you, I could eat donuts all day. That is too funny. Well done. Well played. Well played. Very nice. I will be eating these donuts.
Marvin,
Alright.
yours are on the way. They're not going to be there before the meeting.
No, I'm gonna tell them to come straight to my office so I can have them all.
I'm shocked. I'm like, why are they delivering donuts here? I'm like, don't they know I'm on a call? Come on, guys.
But you know what, Jake, Phil, but listen to this too, what just happened and how that kind of played out, the value in that. So Jerry is on this call from a central station, right? This session today is to talk about service. Jerry just did something that sets a standard. It elevates a standard, right? So he listened to that conversation about donuts and reacted to it. So back to the conversation about if you're not offering things through your central station, you need to. If you're not talking to your central station, you need to. So things like those little battery conditions and things, that probably changes over time, right? So maybe 5 years ago, someone wanted that call, but things may change. So you should be talking to your central station on a regular basis. I talk to mine weekly, if not more. where we're having conversations and adjusting things. Because again, to your point, you don't want to lose an account and you certainly don't want to lose a central station over a situation, right? So if you have the ability to go in there and talk to them on a regular basis to try to manage that and maintain that relationship, ultimately what you are doing is you're providing a higher level of service for that client.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I
Earlier
know
on
that you do
Coffee Break
this,
with
but
Jake.
just looking at daily reports, right, to understand, hey, what happened with the central station overnight,
Yeah.
right? What were the calls that people might have gotten? What were the reported troubles or reported alarms? And then looking a little bit deeper and understanding, like, hey, what was the experience of the customer, right? Or pulling central station recordings from time to time to make sure, hey, we're going to sample some of these calls to understand what does it mean for a customer to get a phone call from our central station? Um, and what is that like, right? And listen carefully to your point about Jerry. Jerry set donuts. This is something Taylor and I were recently talking um, about this concept of listening carefully and responding creatively, right? Listening to what folks are needing, in my case, a donut, and then responding creatively to it and responding in a way that has an impact on that person. I think that's so important. So,
Yeah.
so talk to me, Marvin. Are there any daily or weekly habits, tools, or practices that have helped you remain connected to the customer experience and how they helped you succeed?
I would say, first of all, talk to them. Don't be afraid to answer the phone. You can be the person that answers the phone in your office. Have that conversation, troubleshoot it, figure out what's going on, stay close to that. Back to the central station we were talking about. When you do the QA, listen to some of those calls. Find out if there are friction points where your clients are frustrated over trouble signals or what those issues are that will allow you to adapt to that. And then I would say, also, a lot of it is kind of easy wins of what you're doing in the field. There are things that you could do starting today that make a difference, and you can start teaching your team that as well. And, like first and foremost, be on time, right? And so I know not everybody can do it, and a lot of people are much, much larger than we are, but we have a 2 hour arrival window. We don't give them 4, 6, or 8 hours. Like people don't want to sit home all day waiting for you. Be respectful of their time, be on time. I was on a sales call yesterday and there was an Amazon delivery that was the front door. I know there are a lot of people that would step over that, right? Pick up that package and give it to the homeowner when they open the door. How you present your supplies and your tools, and I'll come back to that in a second. We mentioned cell phones. If you're in my home or my office working on something as a provider, I really hope that you're not going to be on your cell phone because I'm paying you by the hour. I don't want to hear you talking about what you're having for dinner, whether it's hamburger helper or spaghetti or whatever you do. Like, I want your attention on my system, right? Or my office. Take trash bags in with you. Take out the trash. Don't leave it in their trash. Don't leave stuff laying out. Take a shop vac in. Just the client hearing a shop vac sets a whole another expectation with clients. You're pulling up a picture right now I sent you earlier. I love this picture because it's a pain point for me. On Tuesday, I was at this house. It was a home that we already secured, and the new homeowner called us to continue service, and I was there to meet with them. And when I walked up, this is what I saw. There was an HVAC company there. They had gone to lunch, and this is what they've left in the homeowner's front yard. This is a $2.5 million home that's on the water.
So
So,
small place.
yeah, right. So there is zero respect for that homeowner right now. They've got stuff on a white fence there. They've thrown stuff in the yard. They've got stuff on the sidewalk. What you can't see is by the front door, they've leaned up another piece of metal equipment up against the white wall of the exterior of the home. And then while I was there, they came back and the homeowner had to step away from me to go ask them to stop bringing in equipment through her garage by her car. She wanted everything to come in and out of the front door so that there was no risk of damaging her car. And she was so frustrated with me. She said to him, she said, it's like the fourth time I've told him. So she keeps going out there and closing the garage door. If that were my home and that were someone working for me, I would not invite them back. I would allow them to fix or finish that repair if they were on track for it. If they weren't, I would send them home. If they were able to do it, I would do it, but I would never invite them again. So from an easy win perspective and things you can start changing today or tomorrow from a service perspective, you have to be respectful and considerate to people. And that picture to me said like a million words. Like, we'll share that with the whole team, make sure everyone knows that, they see that. I mean, we've all been guilty of doing that. You set a screwdriver down on a table, you scratch it, you nick it, whatever it may be. You have to be conscious of it. And then I know Taylor does this. We do it as well. Like note cards. Like I love note cards. If you can handwrite a note card from a service perspective, that client is with you forever. They're going to hang on to that. They're going to talk about it. Um, we keep dog snacks in the truck. If people have pets, everyone here loves animals. Give them some dog snacks. And then my favorite one is asking for permission to enter rooms. You would be surprised how well it goes over if you ask a homeowner if you have their permission to step into a room, because we all have walked into a room you shouldn't have walked into before, right? But if you ask them permission, and you put some shoe covers on when you walk in the door, you're setting that whole example that your company is standing out above and beyond what is out there in the industry, not just security, but in the service industry as a whole. And you're doing things to set you apart. So that, in my mind, if you can summarize anything from a service perspective, it's all in the attitude and appearance that you create when you walk in.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And we also have to take into consideration the context.
Mhm.
You know, when somebody's calling for a security system, particularly a new install, how often they're at a point where they're feeling vulnerable, right? This is a person that maybe they've experienced a break-in, maybe there was a break-in down the street, maybe they're worried about, some specific issue. And, I think when we decide to get a monitored security system, um, we make a decision in our mind that says, hey, I need security because there are things in this world that I cannot trust. There is some lack of safety out there, and I want to be safe. And so to Marvin's point, being very intentional about asking about, hey, look, can I go into this room? It's I think that's such an incredible way to build trust, build rapport with somebody that, at that time has called you because they're feeling vulnerable. So really, really love that. So Marvin, in your experiences, you've dealt with so many different customers. Uh, Tell me, is there one really memorable customer story or on the job moment that you'll never forget?
I have too many for a couple minutes, but not too far from your shop. We did have a client who was making dinner. She lived alone, and she passed away. She stepped into the other room and passed away while dinner was on the stove. And that fire alarm, it really prevented the house from burning down. She had passed due to another complication in another room, but when the family and I got together to talk through that, you really realize, like, we always say it's not rocket science, but it is life safety. Even from a burglary standpoint, it can be the difference between someone living and someone dying. So you have to know that. And I think those are the moments that mean the most to me because we want to help people. This is a service industry. So if you enjoy helping people, I could go on for hours about those moments. I have lots of them, but that one is probably one of the most impactful ones where the family was thanking me, from preventing that family home from going up in flames. And so it was a big deal. Again, will always stick with me.
Yeah, no, that's impactful. And I think that's, look, it's about awareness. It's about in a bad moment, responding quickly, responding appropriately. And, there was no saving that woman, but gosh, what it means for that family to be able to bury their mother, and I like,
Yeah.
to be able to really, I don't know, just process that in a way that's less traumatic than the whole house burning down. I think that's so meaningful. There's a lot of folks in the call that are wondering if there's one thing that excites you the most about where the industry is headed next, what is it?
I think we continue to grow. I mean, there's always been this talk as to whether DIY was going to affect us or not, and you can have your own opinion, but we continue to grow and continue to be more integrated in the homes. I'm excited that I don't worry about that. I worry about how quickly I can catch up with technology to be able to offer that technology to our clients. So I think I'm most excited about what technology brings. I mean, the fact that today the doorbell can tell me whether it's a package or a dog. I mean, you have to get excited about that stuff because you're solving problems for people and you are providing a solution to something that they desperately need. And to be fair, they're willing to pay for it, right? I mean, we're all for-profit organizations on this call, so they're willing to pay for you to provide a solution to a problem they have.
Yeah, no, I think
But
that's oh, go ahead.
if I could say one other thing, because I know we're running on time, one thing I didn't touch on was, as a company, we have all held meetings on budgets and staffing and policies and procedures and missions and visions and core values and all of that. I mean, if you've not had staff meetings, then you're really lucky, right? But we've all had those. But I challenge the people on this call to make one change, and that is to go back today and put something on your calendar to schedule a meeting that is not going to talk anything other than service. And if you're already doing that, you're ahead of the game. But if you are not, it's a really easy thing to do to start putting it on your radar because once you laser focus in on service, it becomes second nature, but you have to be willing to talk about it. It doesn't happen on its own. It's not a magic trick. You have to say, we're going to make an effort and these are the steps we're going to take. And you have to ask your team because most of them are having more interactions than you probably are with your clients.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful. And it's not just your techs, it's everybody in your organization. People are having interactions with customers.
Sure.
And service is not just how you install it. It's not just, how you, call them when there's an alarm. It's about how you treat them when they call in to update their billing. It's about how you let them know, when their system has failed to communicate, not 60 days later, but hopefully, very quickly to let them know that there's been a failure to communicate. Marvin, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I love OES systems and I always enjoy spending time with you. Um, Guys, we have this call every Friday at 11 a.m. You're always welcome here, whether you participate as a speaker, whether you ask questions or not, or if you're just listening in. Next week, we're going to be highlighting another dealer, Silent Guard, and excited to have Taylor join us next week. But really, if there's anything I want you to get from these calls, it's just one nugget of something you can take and apply to your business to make your business better. As a distributor, we rely on the success of our partners. If they don't sell it, we don't sell it. And so when I want you to be successful, it's selfish because I want to be successful and I need y'all to get there. If you do business with us, I want to thank you for the opportunity to support your business. If you don't do business with us today and would like to learn more about us as a distributor and how we can bless and brand your products with your logo, please reach out. And again, Marvin, I just want to thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Jake. I love you.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.